It's Monday, January 23rd, 2023, and this is the Plan Commission meeting of the Village of Morton, Illinois. Our first order of business would be roll call.
Guile.
Present.
Knapp.
Here.
Ritterbusch.
Here.
Keach. Absent. Zobrist. Absent. Opperly. Absent. Yordi.
Here.
DeWeese.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next up, you all should have gotten the minutes and had a chance to review the minutes from from December 19th. Would somebody, first of all, any comment on those? Any issues with them? If not, would somebody like to
I'll
move?
make a motion that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed the same. Minutes are approved.
Okay. Let's get right into it. So our first item on the public hearings would be petition number 2301 SP. Do you want to make a statement?
Before we start our public hearings, there's a brief announcement I have. We have public hearings scheduled tonight pursuant to published notice. Any person wishing to make a comment to the Plan Commission will be afforded an opportunity to do so and will give their testimony under oath or affirmation. Any person living within 250 feet of any property at issue in a certain case would also have the opportunity at the discretion of our chair to cross-examine a testifying witness. To do so, he must first be recognized by our chair, and the cross-examination must be relevant to matters germane to the issue before the Plan Commission. No member of the public should address the commission or cross-examine the applicant unless and until recognized by our chair. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the village board. The Plan Commission makes recommendations only. The village board is responsible for taking final action on these matters.
Thank you. Petition number 2301 SP. Subject property is PIN 0606193112. The subject parcel is described as Section 19 T25N R3 Southwest Quarter, 75.3 acres. A petition has been filed requesting a zoning change from I2 to I2 with a special use to allow grid-scale energy storage, described as storage, sale, distribution, primary uses of explosive, highly flammable, highly toxic, or radioactive materials. All right. Is anyone here that would like to speak on behalf of the petition or the petitioner first? Okay. You need to get sworn in.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good evening, planning commissioners, village staff, and members of the Morton community. My name is Will Frost. I am a project developer with a company called East Point Energy. And this evening I am here to present our application for a special use permit for the Potters Energy Center, which is a grid-connected energy storage system. As a summary of our application, the applicant is the Potters Energy Center LLC, which is a project-level entity that was created and is owned by East Point Energy. As mentioned, the parcel location is on the western side of Flint Avenue, just south of Marion Manufacturing. We have an option to lease approximately 20 acres from the greater 75-acre parcel, and we anticipate our project footprint to be approximately 15 of those 20 acres. The current zoning for the property is general industrial, and as noted, our use type as determined by the village is the storage, sale, distribution, or primary usage of explosive, highly flammable, highly toxic, or radioactive materials, largely because of our intended use of lithium-ion battery chemistry for the storage. East Point Energy is a Charlottesville, Virginia-based energy infrastructure development company. We focus in the origination, construction, and operation of these energy storage assets, which we do by partnering with utilities, landowners, and communities like Morton in order to deploy these grid scale assets. East Point is a wholly owned subsidiary of Equinor, who is a multi-billion-dollar global energy organization with a strong commitment to a low-carbon energy future, as indicated by their purchase of East Point Energy, with the intent of utilizing East Point as their vehicle into the onshore renewable space within the United States. East Point does not currently have any operational projects in the state of Illinois, and the Potters Energy Center has the potential to be one of the first that we get to a commercial operation date in the state. So what exactly is grid-connected energy storage? In essence, it is a large rechargeable battery that we connect to the electrical grid, utilizing a proven technology in lithium-ion battery cells that we use in things like our cell phones, laptops, and even now our vehicles. It's a technology that does not create any emissions and very minimal amounts of noise, yet it is capable of fully integrating the low-cost renewables that not only the state of Illinois, but the nation is committing towards. It is also a flexible and dispatchable resource that allows an electrical manager to operate the system in an inherently more sustainable and reliable fashion. This is a rendering of an example energy storage project. This is not an actual storage project. It's simply a rendering to highlight some of the specific pieces of equipment that you'll see in a typical energy storage facility. First and foremost are the battery enclosures, which you can see resemble the white storage containers on the left. This is where the energy is stored and the lithium-ion batteries are held. Then you have the inverter stations represented by the green boxes, which is where the energy is converted from a form that can be stored in the batteries to one that can be transmitted on electrical lines. Those inverter stations feed into a project level substation that then connects to the electrical lines. The electricity is collected at the substation and input onto those electrical lines. Every project will be surrounded by a security fence and vegetative screening as needed. These battery enclosures are specifically designed for the storage of energy. The equipment inside these containers typically have a useful life anywhere from 20 to 25 years, and the containers themselves have a useful life well beyond that of the equipment inside. On a typical site, you will see quarterly preventative maintenance inspections, which are utilized to ensure the integrity of all the electrical interconnections on a system, to ensure the operation and cleanliness of the equipment itself, as well as the calibration of all sensors and detectors that are on the system to ensure its continued safe operation throughout its life cycle. To provide some context on the size of one of these containers, one container has can hold up to 15 megawatt hours of energy capacity, which is approximately equivalent to the battery packs of about 250 Tesla Model 3 electric vehicles. For dimensions, a single container will be about 10 feet high, 8 feet wide, and just over 100 feet long. So there are a number of benefits that energy storage provides, and I just wanted to highlight on these 4 particular ones that I think are most relevant to the Village of Morton. First and foremost, as already mentioned, these energy storage systems enable the adoption of renewable energy resources primarily by allowing us to store those renewable electrons in the middle of the day when we would otherwise not be utilizing them and they could potentially get wasted, to then expand that time use window to utilize those electrons when we see peak demand for energy, typically around 5 to 7 p.m. So locating these sites locally allow for those renewable electrons to be distributed on a more local and regional basis, and providing those cost savings that renewable energy will eventually bring to the state of Illinois and to the region in general. They also provide, as mentioned, a great increase in the reliability of the electrical service in the regions in which these are located, not only by providing support in situations where there might otherwise be brownouts or blackouts. It also helps an electrical operator to keep the grid stable with keeping supply and demand in perfect harmony, which is what is needed for our electrical grid to operate. Being being an asset that can be called upon in a moment's notice, it really provides a lot of flexibility for that electrical operator to operate just that inherently more reliable and safe grid. There will be minimal impacts to the social services of the Village of Morton, and through that I mean we do not expect there to be a full-time employee staffed on this project. It will be monitored and controlled remotely, meaning there will be no additional draw on the traffic in the Village of Morton, as well as the school system or the police system. There will be a significant contribution to the local economy by significantly increasing the tax burden or the tax basis of the 20 acres that we will be leasing from the current landowner. We are aware that this property is within the Village of Morton's enterprise zone, which currently awards a 50% reduction in building permit fees, as well as an exemption from building material sales tax, and those are currently the only tax incentives that are being offered to this project. So wanted to use this slide to talk a little bit more about the location of the project and how we ended up in the Village of Morton. And on this, at the end of Flint Avenue here, you can see the project highlighted in red on this slide. Apologies for not pointing an arrow on that. But we targeted the Tazewell County and Peoria County region, generally speaking, for two primary reasons. One being the population density of the two counties. The closer we can site these projects to the actual load, the more useful they will be to the electrical operators. The second reason being for the retirement of the Edwards and the Powerton coal plants just south of Peoria. As those two coal plants retire, it opens up a significant amount of capacity on the electrical lines in the surrounding area. The installation of one of these systems helps to make sure that that capacity continues to be utilized to its full extent, therefore preventing transmission from becoming stranded assets, and it also could potentially prevent in the future any additional expansion of transmission lines through the region. Now you can see the project is on the western side of the Village of Morton. We chose this location particularly because of the transmission lines that are running north to south on Flint Avenue. The Flint Avenue is also an ideal road for this project, as it provides adequate access for vehicles to come onto the property, as well as access to utilities that will be necessary for the construction and operation of the project. And additionally, I wanted to note that energy storage systems are largely considered an extension of electric utility substations in how they impact surrounding properties. The Village of Morton currently has 3 electrical substations that are all situated on different zones and surrounded by residential, business, and industrial properties. The property we have cited this project on is zoned to general industrial and surrounded by other general industrial properties, so we are confident it will not have any impact on current or future uses of the surrounding properties. So here we have our preliminary site plan. This is a preliminary site plan, as we are still working through our interconnection process. This is the largest extent the project could possibly take, as this is the capacity we submitted to the MISO interconnection study, and it can only be reduced from this point. You can see on the southern side, on the hashed areas, those 2 columns, that is where the battery enclosures and inverter stations will be located. To the north, we have the interconnection infrastructure, which include the project level substation where the electricity is collected on the left side, and the switch yard on the right, which is what interconnects the system to those transmission lines. That switch yard has the capability of completely disconnecting the system from the transmission lines if needed at any point during the system's operation. If the system is disconnected from the transmission line, there is backup generation on site to ensure that all auxiliary systems still function despite the system being disconnected from its main source of power. In addition, there will also be an uninterruptible power system that in the event that the backup power also fails for one reason or another, there will be an uninterruptible power system that will continue to operate those auxiliary functions for long enough for someone to get on site and restore that backup generation. The site plan here adheres to all development requirements in the general industrial district, and we will account for any vegetative screening that is required by the village. We are willing to discuss and put in place a performance bond for the decommissioning of this site. Furthermore, we are obligated in our lease with the landowner to decommission this site at the end of our lease agreement, and we are also obligated through our adherence to national fire codes, as I will allude to on the next slide here. Now, the last slide of my presentation before getting to questions is addressing the safety of this system. Now, first and foremost, lithium ion is a proven technology. It's something we use in in a number of aspects of our daily lives. That being said, we are putting a significant amount of it in one location, and we understand that that creates its own unique safety considerations. The industry has advanced an incredible amount over the last decade in creating very robust safety designs to largely mitigate the risks that these systems might pose to surrounding properties. But I want to talk to two specific safety considerations of these systems. First being potential environmental contamination by leaching of chemicals into a water supply or soil. To my knowledge, there has not been an operational system that has recorded such a contamination, largely because of the multiple layers in which the lithium is actually contained in these systems. Typically 4 to 5 different layers is something you could expect on a system. So any kind of puncture to an external enclosure does not lead to a puncture in the battery cells itself, and therefore a leakage of the lithium. The second consideration is the potential for a thermal runaway situation or thermal runaway event, which is an avenue for the off-gassing of toxic chemicals, fire, and potential explosion if those gases are able to accumulate in an enclosed environment. Those risks have largely been addressed and mitigated through the safety designs that have been implemented in these systems, and the industry is only getting more and more advanced in the designs that we implement into these systems. We will be sure to adhere to all local, federal, and state requirements as required by the industry itself, as well as the Village of Morton and its volunteer fire department. We have been in close conversation with Fire Chief Kelly as well as village staff to ensure our adherence to NFPA 855, which is a newly recognized set of codes and standards for the construction, operation, and decommissioning of these energy storage facilities. We are well aware of the requirements of NFPA 855, and we have very strong connections with various subject matter experts throughout the industry to provide the Village of Morton in the event that those contacts are needed in order to hold us accountable to our adherence to that standard, or just to simply understand certain aspects of that standard. The system will be monitored on a 24/7, 365-day-a-year basis, both remotely and on site. It'll be monitored by a person remotely who has the ability to track all aspects of the system and also control nearly all aspects of the system, including that switch yard, which can fully disconnect a system from the transmission line if needed. On site, the data that is being monitored and those controls are accessible to anyone who ends up on site for maintenance purposes or for any kind of incident response purposes. And the last piece of this puzzle is the relationship we currently have and that we will continue to foster with Fire Chief Kelly and the volunteer fire department in the Village of Morton. We will provide regularly updated contact list for subject matter experts in the industry in the unlikely event that the fire department is unable to contact their East Point Energy contact. That East Point Energy contact will be me for the duration of the development of the project, which will then transition to a construction manager during the project's construction, and finally an asset manager who is responsible for the project's operation. Training and site familiarization are vital to the safety of any first responders who have to show up on site at one of these project locations for any kind of incident response. East Point will provide regular updates to that training and site familiarization to the Village of Morton's volunteer fire department. It is often recommended that responses take a more defensive approach, which the equipment within these enclosures, as required by NFPA 855, follow a standard called UL 9540. Apologies for all the numbers. And that code ensures that any any ignition that occurs in a single enclosure is unable to propagate to neighboring enclosures. And what that allows is for the fire department to simply let that enclosure consume itself and take a defensive approach to that response and ensure that there is no exposure to surrounding properties or anything outside of that. In addition to that, we are more than willing to provide whatever the fire department feels that they need in order to feel comfortable and confident in responding to any potential incident response for this system. Now, to finish, I just wanted to comment on a situation that occurred at the end of last year in California. If anyone has looked into it or heard about the Moss Landing fire that occurred in September 2022. This was an incident where ignition occurred in a single container that did not propagate beyond that single container. The locality at Moss Landing made the call to provide a shelter-in-place advisory for all residents within a 3-mile radius of the project. This was ultimately, while a justified reaction to this type of a situation, it was ultimately deemed unnecessary as air monitoring around the project site itself never detected toxic gases at a concentration above which is detrimental to human health. So just wanted to finish with that quick story, and thank you all for your time this evening, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Can we ask our questions before we open up to the public? So what do you guys think about us asking our questions, then giving the public a chance, and then coming back to ourselves? Is that okay with you? All right. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
May I interject one? I did provide a list from staff of 19 questions that we wanted Mr. Frost to address. I tried to go through this, and I think he covered almost everything in his presentation, but number 10, I'm not seeing that number 10, and forgive me if I overlooked that, but could you maybe go over number 10 again, please?
Would you remind me which one number 10 is?
Are there any scenarios that might
Yes.
require an evacuation? Yes.
So that was part of the story for Moss Landing.
Okay.
That is, a fire incident is typically what is viewed as kind of the most impactful to surrounding areas. There was not an evacuation that was conducted for that particular situation, and the shelter in place that was put in place, they also shut down part of Highway 1 out in California just out of an abundance of precaution. And the air monitoring around the site ended up identifying that there was not much of a need for that stay-at-home advisory, just showcasing the lessons learned throughout the industry and the improvements that are being made on a regular basis.
Okay.
So that air
thank you.
monitoring, would that be the fire department that would monitor that and make the decision that it's an all clear, or is there a representative from your site that would be on site, or how's that work?
It would likely be a communal effort between East Point, the fire department, as well as the Illinois EPA. My understanding is that the EPA would likely be the one to do that air quality monitoring around the site, and the coordination of all that would be a responsibility of the team effort between the village and East Point.
Are you familiar with our prevailing winds?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in that, thank you, by the way, for the packet. There's lots of good information in there. Can you talk a little bit about, it did say that investigation was ongoing still.
Okay.
So I was curious, like, how long has this industry been doing these? Because the dates I was seeing, like the oldest date I saw was 2018. So help me out. How long have these facilities been in this iteration, I guess, if you will? How much history is there to this? How long has the tech been around? How long is it?
Absolutely. So I couldn't tell you the date of the first installation of one of these systems. The history of incidents typically starts in 2019 with some things that happened down in Arizona, which led to some incredible advancements in the safety designs of these systems themselves. So, a project that was installed in 2019, development of that project probably began back in 2015, 2016 timeframe, and we don't expect this project to become operational until somewhere around the 2026 timeframe. So, the systems themselves have been on the electrical grid for probably sometime over the last decade is where we've been seeing them starting to be installed more and more, as there's been more of a use case for them through the adoption of more renewables and more policy support that we're seeing on a national scale as well as a state scale. So developments on the safety side have been happening for probably the past 1 to 2 decades, despite the installations lagging a little bit behind that. That's simply a factor of the development of these systems that just take a long time. These interconnection studies take 2 to 3 years to complete. We hope that that's being pulled back as we speak, and we're getting more in that 1 to 2 year time frame. But so yes, while we're getting to the scale that we are currently seeing, more back towards 2019, 2018, the standards for the industry have been really developing over the past decade or two.
Okay, thanks. Please.
Will, you and I met earlier last week. I appreciate your time and conversations. You had a slide up there how it benefits Morton as a local community. You highlighted 4 aspects there, and I appreciate that. And I think that's on everybody's mind. How does this benefit Morton? The contributing to the local economy, Will, I don't see that. I understand that the property taxes might be assessed a little more, but it's not. This is what, a $50 million, $100 million project, give or take.
Upwards of 100 million. Yes.
Right. So on a tax assessment, and Pat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or Brad, it's not going to be taxed on a $50 million structure. It'll be...
Based on my understanding of the present status of the property tax law, I'm not aware that there's a statewide standard. There was legislation proposed to
Right.
create a statewide standard for how these be assessed for property tax purposes. The state's done that in the past for solar and wind. There was a bill proposed in about a year ago that has not reached final action. So at this point, I'm not aware that the state has set consistent direction on how these will be assessed. And I'm not familiar with another facility in the state that would be a benchmark to see how it's been done in other areas. So I think that chapter is yet to be written in the book of how these are regulated.
And energy, you buy the energy, you sell the energy. The selling of the energy is not taxed.
Correct.
Correct.
We're selling in the wholesale.
So essentially, and please correct me if I'm wrong, essentially the benefit in contributing to the local economy, in my mind, the product is not taxed, and the property values would be assessed, I'm using ballpark terms here, maybe a little bit more than farm ground, because there is not a permanent structure on the site. These are what I believe to be shipping containers that are set on piers, not a permanent structure. So I maybe I'm off on that, but contributing to the local economy, I'm probably looking at this at a larger scale, but I think we're really realistically dealing dollars-wise. I think a scale like this, realistically, we're probably like this.
Yeah, no, based on current legislation and current standards, as noted, you're absolutely correct. We've seen adoption for separate taxation standards for solar and wind, which attribute large portions of those systems to the real property of a given property, and we're seeing upwards of 6 figures in the 200,000 to 300,000 range per megawatt of installed capacity of those systems being being the taxable value. This project we don't expect to be operational until 2026. If you ask my opinion, there will absolutely be tax legislation in that similar mindset for energy storage before 2026. We're already in active conversations with trade organizations to get that moving and to make sure that tax incentive is seen by the localities, because we understand it is a hindrance on these projects at this point in time. Thankfully, we still have 3 to 4 years till we get to a point where that becomes more of a reality. And as an additional contribution, there is the likelihood that this project may actually be connected to the distribution system within Morton 2 Power, some of those auxiliary systems. So there, meaning we would likely be an industrial customer to the village as well from an electrical perspective, and that would be taxable to the village.
And well, I agree with kind of where you're going with. I think that's probably, if we're looking long-term, in my research, there has been legislation, on windmills and solar. I mean, it's the future. I don't disagree with you in that aspect. There's no guarantee of that. As of right now, there is no guarantee. And I guess I'm looking at kind of present day in this whole math equation to this. But to your point, I do agree with you on that. That I would assume that would be coming down the line at some point in time. I just don't know when.
So, to piggyback off of that, everyone wants to know how is this going to benefit Morton? So, increasing electric service reliability. So, we know with the coal plants coming offline, to switch more to natural energy, there's the likelihood of rolling blackouts in the area. Am I correct in that this is not actually going to benefit directly Morton? So the energy that you sell back to help increase the reliability of the grid, is that for Illinois? Is that for central U.S.? What's the...
Yeah, so part of the strategy for locating these, you're correct. We're transacting energy on the wholesale electricity market. That is just electrons on infrastructure. There's no saying where exactly that energy will inevitably be used. From an operational standpoint, these are located in particular areas to help alleviate congestion in those areas, to help alleviate some of these issues we see in certain localities. So we do expect this to have at least a regional impact, if not, I can't speak to any specific benefits from an electrical reliability standpoint that it will have directly for the village of Morton, but I can speak to the increased system reliability in the general area, especially as those coal plants go offline.
Will, I have a question to follow up with Ms. Knapp. On that same thing, are you selling it to the highest payer? Those who are willing to pay more dollars than the other one?
So we're simply trading on the wholesale energy market is managed in this area by the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. So there is simply a bidding process that goes on every day. I'm not going to get into the detail. I get way over my head very quickly on that. So it's essentially one of the biggest benefits we see from a cost perspective as far as the cost of recreational energy goes for these energy storage projects is that we are able to charge them on the cheapest energy of the day. Typically when demand is low, but generation of solar and wind are very high. So we see a depression in the price of energy, which we're able to store on our system. Then when we get to peak hours, that price of energy goes up and we start layering our energy resources. We have our base resources, we have our coal resources, then we have our diesel, and we just get dirtier and more expensive the higher we go. These energy storage projects, because they've charged at such a low rate, are able to outbid almost all of those other resources when it comes to selling that electricity back to the wholesale market. So, the system itself will capitalize on that difference there for a short period of time. As once the system gets saturated with more and more storage, that cost curve of energy is going to flatten out over the course of a day, and then we see more of the revenue of the system coming from the ancillary services on the reliability and stability front.
So again, though our tri-county area potentially may need that, they may not be willing to pay as much or able to pay as much as someone else, and they would get it first. Yes or no?
I don't have a yes or no answer to that question.
Okay. That's fine. I have a couple more questions. You talked about the maintenance on that. What's the frequency of that?
On a quarterly basis.
Okay. And you talked about monitoring. I'm going to guess that's through internet?
Yes, I believe so.
You talked about having a backup power situation so that you can continue monitoring. I think several in the room will say regardless of the power going out, they've had internet loss. So what means do you have to stay backup even if you still have that? Would you be using In our community, we have IV3, we have Xfinity. There's potential for Starlinks. What do you have in plan?
That is a fantastic question that I do not have an answer for you here, and something I'll take back to the team to get answered.
You also talked about working with the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine there's special equipment that they would need to address fires from these storage facilities.
There's no special equipment that I can speak to at this point in time. As mentioned, there's the kind of that defensive approach in letting things kind of consume themselves. But this is absolutely a question more for Fire Chief Kelly than it is for me. We are more than willing to provide any special equipment that Fire Chief Kelly deems necessary as we go through the engineering of this site. And as we go through that engineering, it'll be revealed more and more as to what that equipment might look like.
And I just go from some of the newscasts that I've seen from some of our local fire departments in the area, looking for added training and what have you, even dealing with the electric vehicles fires.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay,
I have one other question here. On one of the projects in the past, you built it and kept it for a number of years and then sold it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your mode of operation, the company to build and then eventually sell?
So that was the early phase of East Point. For the about first 3.5, 4 years of its operation, it was a development and flip shop where we would do all of the development work for a project, as far as the siting, all the way to tying a nice bow on top of a project, ready to put a shovel in the ground and sell it to someone who had the capital to then build it and operate it. This acquisition by Equinor is now allowing us to have that capital advantage to build and operate these projects ourselves, and we have every intention of moving forward with building and operating this project.
thanks. In your document, you on page 5, you have a statement that says you were comparing it to the local substations,
Mm-hmm.
but I was wondering if you could help us understand what the relative size. I mean, the facility that you're talking about, let me just read. The battery energy system, BESS, contain the same equipment as these substations. It might be the same equipment, but are we what kind of, can you give us any kind of feel of the size difference?
From an interconnection standpoint, for the substation and switchyard, the substation itself will be similar to the one that's over on, I believe, Jackson Street. The switchyard is where we'll see a bit more unique infrastructure that I don't believe is anywhere in the village of Morton, because we will be having this transmission asset that is connecting to the transmission line. I don't have a reference point in the village of Morton to point to for that switchyard. But the point being for that topic being that the intended use is not, it does not emit any kind of fumes during normal operation hours. We are speaking at a volume that is likely louder than the system will ever generate through its HVAC units or just simply through the movement of electricity onto the transmission lines. So in that sense, it won't have an impact on the surrounding uses.
Yeah, I'm not worried about noise. So there's another, let me orient you here. It talks about, it's the noxious smoke and particulate matter. And it says during normal operation there isn't any, but what about abnormal operation? There's another statement in the document that talks about it's rare. Well, okay, that's fine that it might be rare for a thermal runaway to happen, but tell me about what happens when it does. What's the magnitude of the situation if it does happen?
Right. Yeah.
Let's set aside that it's rare.
I'll point again to the Moss Landing fire back in September of 2022, where an enclosure did ignite. The situation may still be under investigation. I was not fully aware of that investigation, still ongoing, but I do believe that they had confirmed that the concentration of any kind of toxic gases never reached above a a threatening level for human health. And to put it in more perspective as well, we have a lot of things in our typical household that when we see a house fire, we don't know what kind of toxic gases are coming out of that as well. That's less of a regulated, controlled environment. In one of these energy storage systems, we have a much better understanding of everything that is involved in that fire, and there's still a tremendous amount of effort in the industry to better characterize everything that is in all of those NOxes that come out of a potential thermal runaway situation. So in magnitude, it's not all that different from what you'd see out of a typical house, not a typical, but out of a house fire.
Okay, you've referred to the California case, I'll call it case study, a couple of times. So what was that size-wise compared to what you're proposing here?
The system itself, I believe, is about twice the capacity that we're looking to install here, and that fire was contained to one enclosure that was on that facility.
At that facility, do you know the spacings of those enclosures?
I do not.
Okay.
I do know that they adhere to the appropriate codes that are in place for the industry, which are what we would follow as well.
You talked about after this would become operational, you'd have an asset manager who would be the go-to, or the person of interest who would be replying or coming to on-site. Where would that asset manager be located?
That is yet to be determined. There is the possibility that they could be someone stationed out here in Illinois. This transition of East Point into what we consider an independent power producer, where we will own and operate these projects, is still in its infancy. It will be very fleshed out by the time this project gets to operation. We have a pipeline of projects over on the East Coast that'll be maturing in the next 2 to 3 years, prepping for what we intend to do out here in Illinois. So it's too early to give you a concrete answer on that. But there is certainly and if it's something that is required of the village to have an East Point staff member somewhere in the vicinity, that is something we are certainly willing to discuss.
You mentioned the pipeline of projects that reminded me. I'd like to know, in here it said that some of the folks, you have a portfolio of people that have got about 13 years experience or whatever. East Point, what have you done? How many of these projects have, not in previous experience, but in the current configuration of your company, how many of these projects have you done and have in place?
Yeah, so
up and running right now.
Up and running right now, there's currently one system that's actually operational with a rural electrical cooperative out in rural Virginia. There's another one that is currently under construction. It should become operational any day now. That is a 20 megawatt, 4-hour system on the distribution scale. I believe that's in Chesapeake, Virginia. We have a 100 megawatt project, Yadkin's Energy Center, that we also sold, took all the way through development. That was sold to IPA Power. So we have kind of those 3 representative cases of 2 megawatts to 20 megawatts all the way up to 100 megawatts. This project would be 200 megawatts. And then the pipeline that we are currently developing is just getting larger and larger in scale. So yes, we have experience on all facets of scale for development, and we will be building that experience and hiring on that experience in the construction and operational standpoint with the support of a company like Equinor.
I got another question. So the system that you use to monitor and control, so is that a web-based type, internet-based, and then how secure is it? So
right,
has it been penetration tested, for hackers and all this fun stuff, or is it something that's out there? Other organizations are using it. Is it proprietary? Can you just speak in general about that and how you?
Yeah, and to be fully honest here, I have a very limited knowledge in this space, but I am getting more and more up to speed as time goes on. As we contract with a supplier for this system, a lot of the time those suppliers will also have operating systems that they incorporate into the systems that they are manufacturing and building themselves. I'm only going to be guessing at really how those are connected and how we can operate those from Virginia. That was a question that came up earlier that I'm going to go back and get some more concrete information on. But even from a national security standpoint, these systems are going to become more and more important to just the overall stability of the electrical grid, and that doesn't go unnoticed on a national scale. Energy security is increasingly a more and more important topic, especially on not only on a global scale but also within the United States. So, we are owned by a global company who has a much closer tie to a lot of those energy security situations, and it is at the top of their mind to ensure that these systems are adequately protected from all sorts of attacks that we may see from a security standpoint. That's just kind of my anecdotal comments to that, but I'm gonna get some more concrete information on all that.
Thanks.
Pat, I have sort of a question for you here. And we talked about the decommissioning of this and having them put some kind of performance bond to make sure that that's paid. This company's been bought out once. What if they get bought out again, or if they just sell this facility? What's our ability to force that?
So, as a part of conditions that I'll present at the conclusion of the public hearing, one of the recommended conditions is that any approval would be contingent upon a development agreement between the village and the project developer, and part of that would be an approved decommissioning plan and appropriate surety for the decommissioning. There's a fair bit of precedence and different options we have for providing surety for decommissioning for the very reason you suggested. Even beyond the reasons you suggested, it just is a issue of obviously great importance. And so we have some benchmarks from wind and solar projects and approaches that different communities have taken that we rely on, but that would be something that we would explore in written agreement with the developer and have in place before construction commences.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's no more questions from the village or the commissioners?
I got one more. Will, by chance, you said there's roughly 250 Teslas that would go into one container, 100 by 8 by 10. Where are those batteries being manufactured?
Yeah, another great question that I don't have a specific answer for. In the United States, we are currently developing our capacity for the construction of these, or the manufacturing of these battery facilities. We have seen a number of facilities that have been permitted to be constructed up in Michigan. There's another one out in West Virginia that has been constructed, or that will be constructed in the future. So the domestic pipeline is only going to get more and more robust, especially as we now see tax incentives for these systems to utilize domestically made products. Given the current time frame of this particular project and the strains that there are on the current supply chain for these systems and for these lithium-ion batteries, I don't know where that's if our VP of development was here, he'd be able to give a better, more concrete answer on that. He's much more closer to tracking those supply chains and where those batteries will be coming from. So I don't have a concrete answer to that, but anecdotally, we are being more and more aggressive towards a national pipeline for those products.
You as in East Point, or you as in the global company?
Sorry, us as in the country. East Point has no intention on being a battery manufacturer. We are simply going to be the independent power producer. We have partnerships with these manufacturers, companies like Tesla, Powin. There's a couple others out there. We have very strong connections with them for part of the development and flip model was putting in place those supply contracts for people to utilize. So we have those well-established relationships with industry suppliers.
I guess I do have one more question. So if you do move ahead with this and build it here, do you have contractors and do you bring them with you, or do you use local folks to build your installations? I know you said you've only really got one or two of them, but what have you done in the past, I guess?
So we have not been the organization to actually construct these projects in the past, so I can't speak to the crews that have been utilized to construct the projects that we have developed. It is our hope that we will utilize local industry for these projects. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. We're going to use the most competitive bid for construction, which a lot of the time will come from local institutes and local companies. So, at the end of the day, it's a business. We're going to choose the best opportunity and the best case for the construction of these sites. I would expect a lot of that to a lot of the financials to work out for local labor for those purposes. And any local labor will obviously have the opportunity to bid into that construction RFP process.
So am I right, the stormwater, the drainage on that site flows from west to east, so toward town, right?
I don't know for sure which way it drains, but any kind of,
Yeah, it does, actually, in the report. It says that the
Okay.
stormwater flows toward us, and the prevailing winds are toward us, right?
The drainage of the particular property that we are located on, it flows down towards the east. There's currently drainage tiles on the property that we will ensure are either kept in place or replaced with better drainage for the actual farmland to the west of the property. There will be any necessary retention ponds on the site to contain any kind of stormwater runoff that there will be from the site. That'll all be part of the engineering and design phase of the project.
If there was a spill, though, or if there was an explosion, it's going to come our way, right? It's going to come toward the village? Probably? Maybe not? Okay.
I think, Chad, the natural watershed, and correct me if I'm wrong, is probably the creek just east of there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we'd be looking at, I got it here on the map. Yeah, that would be the creek east of there. Kind of runs along the interstate.
Okay, if there's no more comments from the commission, let's open it up to the public. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak to this topic, this particular petition? If so, come on up and have yourself sworn in. Sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Excuse me, sir, if you could just step over there and then give us your name and... Thank you.
My name's Gary Fisk. I live in Morton, 111 Woodcrest Avenue. In the event of a catastrophic event, I see that the company is LLC. Do I understand LLC is limited liability company? And if that's true, how limited is your liability?
If, Will, you desire to respond to that question, we'd ask you to do it at the podium, just so we can maintain a record of the proceedings.
I am not aware of the specific legal obligations and what the term and how that comes out with limited liability. What I can say is that East Point will be held responsible for any kind of situation that occurs with this system, and we will be liable for the remediation of the site.
In the grid that is red, is that the 22 acres or is that the 75 acres?
That is the 20 acres with a very large order.
What are you going to do with the rest of that property? I know you mentioned containment pond. Anything else?
We currently only have an option to lease those 20 acres, so the remainder of the property will remain in the hands of the current landowner, as the 20 acres is in the hands of the current owners as well. you will have an option to lease.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Unless absurd.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Based on what I've been able to look.
Excuse me,
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Give
My
your
name is
name.
Eric Foster. I'm at 521 South Main Street
Thank
in
you.
Morton. Okay. Based on what I've seen, lithium-ion battery fires produce high heat, high smoke, and toxic gases. A couple of different toxic fluoride gases. Do you have any plans to put a foam suppression system inside your enclosures so that these fires can be knocked down before there's any risk to the community?
Given we still haven't gotten to the engineering phase of the system, I can't speak to the specific fire suppression system that will be in it, but this will be a conversation we have with the village with the fire department and Fire Chief Kelly to ensure that yes, a foam gaseous option is certainly something that we have to work with for fire suppression, as well as just the complete inundation of one of these containers in water. So yes, there are various different fire suppression systems that we have to work with, and that will be part of the engineering process that we go through with the Village of Morton.
And then I guess based on our discussion of the prevailing winds at 10-mile-an-hour wind, it'd take a smoke cloud all the way across town in a matter of minutes. So hopefully that's considered by the village in our requirements.
Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth,
I'm Mark Roth from 20043 Roth Road in Morton, Illinois here. My first question that I do have, you said you're using utilities. What utilities are you using from the village specifically that you're going to need?
So the most obvious is likely the electricity from the distribution system. A secondary utility could be access to water for any kind of fire suppression systems, as well as any kind of fire hydrants that may be required on the facility deemed required by the village.
Okay. Other question, or another one that I have, is when you were talking about the detection system for the fire out in Arizona, or not Arizona, the one that was in California, have they come further along? I mean, I know technology evolves, but supposedly from what I've read and what I've seen, when a thermal runaway, even the detection systems, all of a sudden it's so hot and soot, it clogs all your detection systems. Can you speak to that at all?
So there are a number of, and this is all highlighted in Appendix B of our application for planning commissioners. There are a number of preventative measures that are put in there prior to there even being a thermal runaway event. They are indicators of something wrong with a cell that could potentially lead to a thermal runaway event. These include the detection of off-gassing, where if a battery starts to overheat, there will be some gases that are released, which I don't know exactly what the thresholds are for that detection, but it is as soon as there's any kind of indication of a gaseous substance coming from a battery cell, that it would be shut off or contained in whatever manner is appropriate for that particular situation. There are also, now I'm forgetting the other items. Let me pull up the. Sorry about that. So the off-gassing is certainly one of the obvious situations. There's also thermal detection. So there's a threshold in which these batteries are supposed to operate. under, and any deviation from that threshold will set off an alarm for whoever's operating that system, and they can identify specifically which cell that is occurring in. Those are kind of the two primary prevention or containment techniques prior to even getting to a thermal runaway situation.
Other one on that note, do you know how long from when your system detects it, what is the threshold of time that it can go into a thermal runaway? Because from what I saw, it was like 3 to 5 minutes even.
I don't have a concrete answer on that. What I would assume is that there are industry standards that are put in place for those connections to ensure that whoever is operating a system is being notified within a certain threshold of time. But I can't speak to any specific numbers there.
And then one final question, I'll be done. I know right now you're not necessarily saying you're not going to have anyone on site. If you would have a problem where something doesn't work correctly, you have off gases and we got to monitor the gases. I know you said Illinois EPA or one of your representatives. How long is that going to take until they're on site to be monitoring this before it moves into our community?
Again, another question I don't have concrete answers on until we're able to better define response plans with the local fire department. But you can rest assured that we have a strong relationship with the fire department, and we are willing to get these plans to a position where they are comfortable with our ability to support them in any kind of response activities.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and whole truth?
I'm Laura Martin, and I live on Edgewood, very close to the property. Mine is, maybe I'm ignorant on this, but is my understanding correct that special use changes run with the land? And if so, if that's the truth and this is being leased, does it end if they end their tenancy there? And what happens with that special use?
So I can speak to that. I'll invite Brad to supplement. The special use generally runs with the land. However, if the special use is discontinued for a period of time, I believe it's 12 months. I'd have to look at the code to be sure. Don't have it memorized. But if the special use is discontinued for a persistent period of time, then it would require new approval before a new use could commence. So if at the end of the lease term, this use ceased, and then 10 years later somebody wanted to do a similar thing, they'd have to come back before this board for a new special use permit.
Okay, thanks.
You're correct, it is 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
Someone else?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and whole truth?
I need to bring that down. Hi, I'm Marie Fisk, and I live here in Morton, and I have a few questions for the young gentleman here. Okay, first, I'm just going to ask about the company. The company started in 2018, is correct? How long have you been with the company?
Sorry. I have been with the company for approximately a year and a half at this point.
And then in August of 2022, the company sold to Equinor, who's located in Norway. They're located in Norway. And I know it's a large global company, correct? Right. You said they're a large global company.
They are headquartered in Norway. They have global offices. The one that we are in closest connection with is in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay. Okay. So my question is, what are the regulations pertaining to the proximity to residential areas?
There are no regulations that I'm aware of for these systems being located next to residential areas. And as far as infrastructure, electrical infrastructure goes, they are actually quite residential friendly.
A structure this large, they're residential friendly?
As far as electrical infrastructure goes, yes.
Okay. This is a new topic for me, and it's a new topic for, I'm sure, for everyone in this room. Okay. So where will the electricity be coming? Where will the energy source, the Okay, what energy source will supply the electricity to these batteries?
The battery will simply be pulling electrons from the electrical infrastructure. The transmission lines themselves are indifferent on where those electrons are coming from. So
So is that what the wind turbines will be doing, or is that different?
So it's harder to look at. The electrical grid has to be looked at in more of a larger scale, where we put on, so we can look at it in the state of Illinois. We're starting to put on these renewable resources which are inherently intermittent at their nature, which is creating some exacerbation in the differential in the cost of energy for the entire state. So by participating in the wholesale market, we are generally supporting the transmission of electricity around the entirety of the state and the general infrastructure here. You know, we do target these particular locations because the pricing that certain localities pay for energy are dependent on certain what we call nodes of energy. You know, we have hubs, like the state of Illinois is a hub, and then there's a node over in Peoria, and that's what your local energy price is based off of. So we cite these systems next to nodes that we see higher congestion, and therefore we're seeing higher local electricity prices, with the intention for these projects to lower the congestion on those nodes and therefore lower the price at that particular node.
Okay, I know we're talking about what you want to build here, but then do you know then all the wind turbines that are being constructed? Does that feed into any of this?
Yeah, no, I understand the question. Yeah, no, it's hard to say exactly if the electricity generated at this wind turbine is going into this storage facility. The installation of renewables has created the incentive for these energy storage systems to come online to support the use of those renewables. So in theory, yes, absolutely.
So that's why then Equinor is building all the wind turbines in the Atlantic Ocean from off of Long Island, off of Jones Beach in Brooklyn, right? Right?
Yes, they have
yes.
these for,
Right, and they started 15 miles out in the ocean, out there off of Jones Beach, and they're going to go all the way down, right, to all the way down the Atlantic Ocean, down through the Jersey Shore, and all the way to the Carolinas. So, and then we're going to have more wind turbines. They already started on the West Coast, but Equinor has started that. Okay, so they will be feeding into, I guess, all of this energy here that we're talking about, all this renewable energy. Okay, I just wanted to bring that up. So, how do you dispose of these batteries? And I know you say, they're good for 20 years, but eventually you're going to have to dispose them. So how are they going to be disposed?
Yeah, great question. The useful life of lithium ion is going to go well beyond its use as a utility scale structure, utility scale system. So these batteries are going to have uses beyond their time in this system. So they will be recycled into other uses for lithium ion batteries.
Really, so what? You're saying they could be 20 years. So is it right now, is it unknown? No one knows?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
You're saying they could be 20 years, good for 20 years. And then you're saying what? Then they could recycle these hazardous batteries into something else? Is that what you just said?
Yes, the batteries that are utilized in the storage facility that we are looking to develop, those batteries can have a potential useful life as another, in some other use outside of a utility scale application after their useful life as that utility scale application. If there is no additional use for them beyond that life cycle, they will absolutely be recycled because lithium has uses beyond just energy storage.
Okay. Has there been an independent official risk assessment regarding proposed storage of these hazardous material? Has that been done? An independent risk official?
I'm not sure what you would be referring to as far as an independent official risk assessment.
assess regarding the proposed storage of, is there going to be an independent official to assess the risk of the proposed hazardous materials for the site? You know, is any of that going to be?
For this particular site?
Yeah.
I believe so. I mean, that could be a requirement of a special use permit to go through a full specific risk assessment there. There have been assessments on the technology itself. I can't point to any ones in particular, but I know the research space has been very active on understanding the risk profile of these systems.
Okay, and I think someone asked you this, but what has been done to determine if the Village of Morton can adequately prepare to manage the worst case disaster? I mean, who could answer that? No one knows, right?
We have been since August of last year in active communications with the village, as well as the volunteer fire department and Fire Chief Kelly, to ensure that we are accounting for any kind of worst case scenario with the system.
So you've been in contact, communicating with them since last August, and now the public's just finding out about this?
May I, so a special use request, the application came in that qualified for this January meeting. So there never was an application. So quite frequently the village does get companies that will inquire and have questions. And so our role is to try to help answer those questions. Is that kind of what you're?
Okay, but I mean, the citizens, we found out about this, I mean, just recently. So the village officials have known about this for several months, discussing.
No, we've not had there was not an official application.
I know not an application, but he just said he's been in discussions with village officials.
Yes, we have discussions with numerous companies that call. That's our role.
Okay, just thinking if I have any other questions. Okay. So, it sounds like there's a lot of unknowns right now. Oh, and the corporate company, they're doing things with Germany. Do you know about that, what they have going on with Germany? Okay. Just ask.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth?
I'll be brief. Rodney Auberly, I reside in Tremont. I'm the current tenant of the proposed property. My question is, as our villages look to more and more renewable energy sources, are storage containment sites like this going to be more commonplace, and is there an advantage to having one of these near Morton, and that's going to allow solar projects to be more utilized in this village or anything like that? Wind would be the same thing.
Yes, absolutely. These projects will become more and more commonplace. We're already seeing, we saw the federal legislation incentivizing the construction of these facilities. We expect to see some state level incentive as well over the next year or two. These systems are supporting the full integration of those renewable resources. So, one of the consequences of not having storage tied with renewable energy is the inherent intermittency, where we end up seeing increases in electricity prices, because now when we're using that energy in the peak demand time, we've taken off some coal generation and we're no longer seeing the full solar and wind generation that we were seeing during the daytime. So we actually see an increase in the cost of energy without supplementing our renewable development with these types of energy storage systems. So yes, they're absolutely going to become more commonplace as time goes on, and having one in the village of Morton provides some level of local benefit for that cost of electricity overall, and also it allows the village to require certain things of us in the development and the construction of this project. If we sited somewhere outside of the village, nearby, we're going to be under a different entity, and it may still have a similar impact. There may still be similar concerns, but we won't be under the jurisdiction of the Village of Morton. And right now, Morton has every opportunity to require certain things of us.
One other thought, it seems like stability is a big word as we project forward, looking at energy usage and those sorts of things. And has it been done in other small villages or in larger communities where the community itself has some control over storage, so that it's not being sold to the highest bidder, it's being utilized locally first and then it goes out? And I'll take a seat.
Yeah, there are community-based assets. We see there's a number of different scales we can go here. There's distribution assets which connect to distribution lines that you see on your regular streets. There's community-based assets which are, you hear community solar, that can often be paired with storage. Community solar is contributing to that specific locality. This is a transmission asset which has a more distant impact to the specific locality because we are just at that extra step on the scale of the project. So we are not only providing the benefits of cost to the Village of Morton, but also to the city of Peoria and to the two counties in general. Yeah.
Someone else? No, no worries.
My name is Trisha McDaniel, and I reside at 223 Tamarack Avenue. My family also is bordered alongside this as well at 1110 West Birchwood. So one of our questions is, how will this impact home and property values that's surrounding this? I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I know you had mentioned before that you personally didn't think that, there's any negative, impacts, but has there ever been any research on that?
Any research on property values specifically?
Yes, for existing, for others.
Absolutely. I don't believe I've ever come across any existing research for energy storage specifically, but you can look at some research that's been done on solar farms in certain areas, and there's been negligible changes to property values that have been cited around solar projects. Additionally, this is a use that fits the character of the general area here. Right across the street, there's two very large trucking companies that just large paved lots. We're going to abide by whatever vegetative screening is required by the village, as well as just general beautification of the system itself. So, yeah, those are my answers to that.
Gotcha. So, because I tried Googling that, Bing, whatever your search engine is, and I couldn't find anything on that. Is there any way that East Point, Energy could maybe look into that and provide the Village of Morton some information on that? Or does anyone have any recommendations of where we could go, possibly to get that type of information?
Yeah, I'm more than willing to look into that. I have done my Googling myself on that topic too, and because I know this is a concern to localities and to neighboring properties.
Yeah.
As mentioned, we're willing to look into things. There's only so many data points right now for energy storage. So even the data that we collect may not. The data points that we have also haven't been in place for really long enough to fully understand the impact it has. That's why we kind of have to lean on studies that have been done for wind and solar, and showing that there really hasn't been any impact to property value, particularly for solar. I can speak more to that than I can to wind. So we kind of have to lean on those, but yeah, I'm more than happy to look into it more.
Okay, thank you. One more question. I cannot recall the time of year, what year this was, but there was tornadoes that have gone through this area. These containment systems, what are they rated?
Yeah, those ratings are all covered in this NFPA 855. I can't speak to the specific ratings themselves, but I do know that there are standards set on the enclosures for, tornado-like conditions. I'm sure Fire Chief Kelly can speak a bit better towards any specific requirements that there might be, but I've certainly been exposed to kind of the base level requirements or the base level testing that these systems go through as far as their resilience to natural disaster like that.
And we can find that online?
Yes.
Correct?
NFPA 855 is a public document.
Okay, so it'll have that particular information on there. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do. Public speaking. My name is Joe Fuller. I live over on Brookcrest Avenue here in Morton for about 8 years. I work for Caterpillar up in Mossville, and for the 6 years ending in 2021, I was the lead facility engineer for the facility up there, and as a matter of fact, worked on immediately dangerous to life and health systems up there for a long time, and was lead engineer for systems, I'll say exactly like this. I guess if this thing were located out in the middle of the farmland, nobody's probably going to get concerned, right? But if it's that far away, it's going to be really expensive for this company to do business and turn a profit. So I'm only going to say a couple things. I'm not going to ask any questions, but there are a lot of other technologies coming down the pipeline for energy storage that don't have some of these concerns. And being that it's this close to the city of Morton, I'll say I worked directly with the fire department up in Mossville, intricately on the design of those systems, and the emergency response requirements, procedures, cost, investment was significant, even though the probability of an issue is very, very low, the severity is very, very high. So the being that it's this close to the city, there were a lot of unexpected costs and investments that we had to make to prepare for that I'm assuming the city would or someone else would have to make as well. And in that event, I would just recommend that we hire a third party or someone to vet some of those concerns. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So that'll wrap up the public comment. Any last comments from the commissioners? Any questions?
Does Fire Chief Kelly want to say anything, or I would just be interested in your thoughts.
I'm no subject matter expert either, but I've learned a lot in the last couple weeks, a few months about this, and we have done our best to try to stick to the development of the codes that have come out related to this, because those are subject matter experts and that do testing and also take in some of the real world situations that he's mentioned here tonight. So the document that he's mentioning, the 855, actually is the newest edition, was just released 2 weeks ago. So that code development continues to move as new information comes to light. I would say that it's not particularly concerning in terms of lithium-ion batteries from the point of view that we deal with those all the time. That's on everyone's phone, and your computer is probably a lithium-ion battery. And they do sometimes have problems. And in fact, I could tell you that our last lithium-ion battery fire was about 4 hours ago. So I'm not saying that that's not a real concern. The difference in this case is the fact that there's a lot of them. There's so many of them. And what we've looked to doing to mitigate some of those potential issues is look at those systems that are being recommended by code. And those have changed over time. And earlier it was mentioned about a foam suppression system. But the current is a misting type water system that actually helps cool down batteries and prevent a fire from ever occurring. Again, that's just been one of those developing things that some of the containers and the fires that have happened before today, before the development of those codes, didn't have those systems. Explosion prevention systems that help dissipate the gases that can occur from off-gassing and could be flammable. So, you know, I don't want to give the perception that there isn't a concern, because there certainly is. But from what I've researched, this isn't a 3 Mile Island level concern either, where we would expect there to be this horrific disaster that made us evacuate our town. So I'm just trying to put that all into a little bit of perspective. And in our research, we have come up with a few systems that we are going to require them to have in place. They've not argued against any one of those. They've heard most of those systems, if not all of them. And we stay open to the development of any future code requirements and systems that come along that may even dissipate that risk even a little bit further. I don't know if that answers your questions, but I'm just trying to give an idea of where we're at with the fire department.
Before the commissioners is a list of recommended conditions that came from that collaborative process that staff worked so hard on before cases come to you, to make sure from preliminary inquiry through application that the staff is doing their best to research and provide supportive information for you. Number one on that list before you is those fire safety standards Chief Kelly alluded to, which would include as a recommended condition on the award of the special use, if you were so inclined to recommend its award. That would require compliance with NFPA Standard 855 as set forth in the 2023 Code Edition. That would be the minimum requirement for mitigating the hazards associated with the energy storage system. In addition to that, any storage systems within a container or structure in excess of 80 kilowatt hours would have additional protections that would include an approved water-based total flooding condensed aerosol fire sprinkler system in accordance with the most recent edition of NFPA 13 or of equivalent design, which also includes a fire department connection. Private fire hydrants would be required to be installed within 50 feet of each storage system on private service mains in accordance with NFPA 24. A fire/smoke detection system with 24/7 monitoring in accordance with the most recent edition of NFPA 72, in which activates the fire sprinkler system. A gas detection system capable of battery off gas monitoring, which also automatically disconnects power to affected cells, activates the ventilation system within the enclosure, and activates local and remote alarms, which are monitored on a 24/7 basis. And an explosion prevention system designed, installed, operated, maintained, and tested in accordance with the latest edition of NFPA 68 and 69. Those recommendations came from Chief Kelly's research. The other recommendations on your sheet are lumped under mutually palatable development agreement is recommended condition. That development agreement would be negotiated and executed and approved as a condition of special use, if special use were to be approved. That development agreement would be required to set forth a development plan, or decommissioning plan, which would lay out the path and process by which the site would be decommissioned. It would address surety to ensure that the developer's obligations are met, usually in the form of a cash bond or a surety bond or a performance bond. It would address the installation of required new streets per the Village of Morton official planning map, maintenance of private fire hydrants, private water mains. It would require the developer to set forth an emergency operations plan to be provided to the village and approved by the fire chief. That development agreement, another recommended required term would be that any specialized fire equipment necessary for safety of the site would be provided by the developer or the owner of the site at their cost and replaced as needed for obsolescence at the owner's cost. Require fire department training at the owner's cost. It would include provisions for site fencing, a site security plan, and vegetation management. So those are recommended conditions. If you were to recommend an award of a special use, those are a product of staff work to date.
And I guess I would point out in that those are not things that the developer has come to us and said, well, we think that we should have this. This is independent research that we've done ourselves using those codes and standards to say these are the systems that we want to see put into place. Again, the company is not balked at that, but I don't want to give the impression that we're just going by what the development company tells us, because that's not the case.
Thank you. Thanks for all this work. All right then.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve petition number 23-01 SP.
How do we attach this?
Would it be included in your motion subject to the conditions set forth in the sheet I handed out?
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Knapp,
No.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Guile,
No.
DeWeese,
Yes.
Doherty.
No.
Motion fails.
As a reminder of procedural announcement made at the start of tonight's meeting, Plan Commission makes recommendations only. Those recommendations go on to the Village Board. Village Board is responsible for taking final action on these matters. Village Board receives a transcript of this proceeding, receives a recommendation. The Plan Commission is reflected by the vote, then the Village Board takes action.
I would like to make a statement. Can I make a statement? So I feel like there's a lot of opposition about this in the community, and I feel like a lot of that opposition is based in fear of the unknown, right? And I'm not voting no because of that. I feel like this is going to be the future. This is going to be very prevalent in the next, 5 to 10 years. That being said, it appears like Equinor's done 8 installs. 6 of those are rather small. 2 of them are at half of the size of what this is going to be. This one's going to be very large. There's always a risk of unknown. It's new technology. It's a large implementation. And like Mike brought up some of the points, I don't know that the benefit is there financially, and so I was concerned about that. And I'm also concerned about stagnating the growth in that direction. So I don't know if other businesses are going to want to put their developments in around that facility. So those are the reasons. I feel like I want to say my reasons so that way the village board knows why I voted the way I did. And it's not an easy decision for me because I feel like the plan is very robust. I feel like Equinor has done a great job of putting in safety precautions, putting in plans in place. I think, Will, you've done a great job explaining yourself. So it's not an easy decision for me, but I do want to state the reasons why I voted the way I did.
Thanks, Kara.
I will say that Will and I met face to face for an hour last week. Every question that Will could not answer at that point in time, he got back with me, I would say within 24 hours. So Will, that says a lot about you and what you do. So thank you for your time in that.
All right, let's move ahead. Petition number 2302ZA. This is subject property is all of the part of PIN 0606-2100-003, lying south of the Toledo, Peoria, and Western Railway right-of-way, being approximately 18.737 acres, and all of PIN 0606-2101-002. A petition has been filed requesting a zoning change from I2 to B1. And did you want to speak to this, Brad, at all?
Yes, the Village of Morton is making this request. to go from I.
Brad, if I can.
Oh, yes.
You actually need to be sworn in since you're the petitioner on this.
Sorry.
Okay.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the truth.
Take the fifth.
So the Village of Morton is petitioning for this rezoning to go from I-2 to B1. B1 is the most restrictive zoning in B, which when we go into more restrictive zoning, then that's less things that can be done there. So the view is when we go to more restrictive zoning, that is a positive for the surrounding parcels. Happy to answer any questions. Do you have any?
Commissioners? All right. Public? Any public questions regarding this petition? Don't see any. So, do I have a motion to?
You got a question?
Oh, we do. Come up, sir. Be sworn in.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth.
I'm Dan Neep. My wife Christine, we own 342 Detroit Avenue, which would be catty corner up across railroad tracks. Can you just explain, the city is proposing this?
Yes.
Where does, for us that don't understand, where's this coming from?
The Village of Morton has an agreement to purchase this property, and the village would like to bring it down to a more restrictive zoning of B1.
I didn't know it was being purchased. That's where I guess where I was.
Yes.
And so future plans, we don't just to restrict the property and then develop it, or?
I can't say of what the future plans are there, but at this point in time, it would just go to B1 zoning. So anything that could be in B1 would be a permissible use there, which is professional, office professional.
Okay. Is there any reason we should not want it?
I'm not aware of any.
Brad, the current zoning, the way it is now, would actually, am I correct, that it would actually allow for a battery storage facility?
No,
Is it
battery
not?
storage is a special use in
Oh, I'm sorry,
I2.
it's I2, and it's zoned.
It's
This-
I2.
this is I2
Special
currently.
use.
Right, so it's
Yes.
in that industrial zone with the general public living rather close to it.
So it is so currently it's I2.
Right, and so, right, that's what I
So-
guess my point is that it is I2, we're trying to make it more restrictive to what can go in there with housing as close as it is to there. Because it looks like there's some private residential housing just to the southeast on
Yeah,
Columbus
so,
Avenue.
so if you look to the south, that's B3, which is a more liberal zoning. It goes B1, B2,
Correct.
and B3. Then to the east, you have industrial 1, and you also have B1, which would be the police department, that parcel. And then you do have residential, which would be to the southeast. But as it currently stands at I2, those two parcels could be industrial, which is the most liberal of zoning.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't have any objection to going to B1 now, but I2 is obviously too broad of a zoning classification for this property because it's in next to Detroit Street, and businesses that are up not just north of the railroad track, I can see that not being I2, but I think B1 is going to be too restrictive. I don't think you're going to get any takers on any of this property at a B1 classification. So we'll probably be back sometime changing it to B2 and B3, but that's okay.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So I'll make a motion that we approve the rezoning.
I'll second.
Knapp,
Yes.
Guile,
Yes.
Ritterbush,
Yes.
Deweese,
Yes.
Doherty.
Yes.
Motion's approved.
Thank you. Okay. Any other business, Brad?
I have nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Should we adjourn? Somebody like to make the motion?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Adjourned.